Hello, friends and followers, and welcome back to A New Way to Museum. I am Curtis Schmidt, the Zoological Collections Manager here at Sternberg. And what I'm going to show you today are some adaptations for burrowing and a life underground for a number of different groups of animals. So typically when we're thinking about animals that live underground, if you really think about it, what are the things that we're not going to need if we're living in burrows underground and we very rarely come to the surface? We're not going to need eyes, right? Because it's dark all the time. We also don't want to get dirt and things like that in our eyes. So we also, these right here, take up a lot of space, and we don't want them getting in the way. We don't want to get dirt in our ears. We don't want it catching on things. So we look for reductions in eyes, reductions in ears, and things like that. And also adaptations for doing the digging and doing the excavating of the soil. So I'm going to show you some of those things in a couple different groups of organisms here. Starting at the bottom. So obviously these are mammals. They've got fur. This is a shrew. Very specifically, this is Elliott's short-tailed shrew. And if you look at it, what was I saying before? You can't see any external ears. You can barely see any eyes. They do have eyes, very tiny eyes, and they do have ears that are also basically just holes in the side of their head. So they can still hear, they can still see. Shrews do come to the surface occasionally at night. So they do still need those senses. They're not always underground. But you can definitely see the reduction in those things right there. So moving down, this is probably the most well-known and well-exaggerated burrowing mammal, the mole. So this is an eastern mole. It has lots of different burrowing adaptations. You can see, as I mentioned, no external ears, basically no functioning eyes because they don't need them. It's dark in those burrows where they're at all the time. But they've also got really short, really powerful diggers. Those claws right there and those forearms, really, really good at digging and excavating soil. A really unique adaptation that they've got, if you look at the fur, most mammals, the fur goes one direction. Like if you have a dog or a cat and you pet it, you know you pet from the head to the tail. You don't pet from the tail to the head because the fur doesn't run that way. With these guys, the fur goes either direction. So that these guys can either go forward or backward, and they're not going to get slowed down either way. It's not going to mess with them at all. So very interesting there. Now moving down the line here, another one that's really, really known for burrowing. This is a plains pocket gopher. And again, very similar to the mole, you've got tiny little ears, tiny little eyes, and then exceptional diggers. They have really, really big claws and really good at digging. So take a look at those. Excellent for digging. But not only do they use those claws and those forearms for digging, they also have giant incisors in their mouth. Giant teeth that they actually use to dig with. So they're scraping away at the soil with those giant teeth as well. Really fascinating animals. So that's the plains pocket gopher. Now, most people, if they see a hole in the ground or they see a burrowing mammal at all, will call it a gopher. These guys get called gophers all the time. This is a 13-line ground squirrel. Now this utilizes burrows, but it's not an animal that lives underground. I mean, it goes down there to sleep, it caches its food and stashes its food in its burrows, but it doesn't live underground. So you can see it doesn't have the giant claws. It's not made to be doing the digging. It's got ears. You know, you can't see it very well in this specimen, but definitely has external ears, good-sized eyes. So it's actually a squirrel. It's not a gopher. And there's several different species of ground squirrels that live underground and use burrows, just like many other mammals do. But they don't have the adaptations for living underground like the others that we just talked about. So a lot of people confuse those and call them gophers, but they're not. They're ground squirrels. So the last mammal I want to show you right here is kind of the same way. This does not necessarily live underground, and everybody knows what this guy is. This is a badger, North American badger. And they're known for their digging as well. And if you look at those claws, you can see why they're such exceptional diggers. But again, similar to the ground squirrels, they're just making their burrows that they're going to spend some of their time in, but not all of their time. These guys come out at night, they come out at dawn and dusk. You know, when it's starting to get dark or starting to get light, these guys are very active at the surface. They do their hunting at the surface for the most part. So they've got those giant claws for digging holes, but they don't have the adaptations to actually live underground. So moving away from mammals, there's also amphibians and reptiles that have adaptations for living underground. So this is a plains spadefoot toad, and it's upside down, so this is what it looks like. And these are extremely abundant throughout the state of Kansas, but you know what? You don't see them very often because they spend 90% of their life buried in the dirt and underground. They only typically come out when it rains or it's really, really humid. So spadefoot toads have this cool adaptation right at the base of their feet. And it's a very hard little structure. And it's where they get their common name spadefoot toad. So they use these really hard little spades to dig in the soil, and instead of burrowing forward, they're actually burrowing backward. So if you were to put this animal down on the ground, on the soil, the first thing it's going to want to do is bury itself and go underground, and it just disappears backwards by using those legs and those spades on its feet. So they are very at home underground. Really fascinating animals. They'll come out to breed, they'll come out to eat, but that's about it. And then there's this other guy. So the reduction in ears and the reduction of eyes isn't always the only thing. If you're a burrowing lizard or another animal with limbs that burrows, your legs are going to get in the way. So this is actually not a snake. This is a lizard that has no legs. Why? Because it spends most of its time underground, burrowing. They do come out, they feed on crickets and grasshoppers and things like that, so they come out to eat. But they're highly specialized without limbs to go under the soil, go into the leaf litter, without having those limbs to get in the way. So they basically just swim through the soil. So fascinating little animals. And again, a lot of people think those are snakes, but they're not. There's ways that we can tell they're not snakes because they've got eyelids. If you look closely, you can see its eye is actually closed. Snakes do not have eyelids. They also have little holes in the side of their head, which is their ear opening. Snakes don't have external ear openings either. So those are a couple ways. Now, you're going to probably thinking, well, you'd have to be right up in a snake's face to know if it's a lizard or a snake to be able to see those characters, which is true. So I always tell everybody, make sure you know exactly what you're looking at before you get that close. The last group I want to show you, because obviously there's lots of burrowing insects out there as well that spend most of their lives underground. Most of you have probably never seen these before, but they are very common throughout the state of Kansas. These are called mole crickets. And if you look at it, I mean, it's kind of built like the mole that we looked at before. And the structure that we really want to emphasize are those burrowing forelimbs. So these guys live underground. You hear them a lot more often than you see them, because they call just like other crickets and grasshoppers do. They call at night, but they're very, very difficult to find and locate because they're usually underground when they're doing it. So just look at those adaptations for burrowing and living underground and digging underground. They're going to have very small eyes typically as well, or no eyes at all. So there's kind of an introduction to burrowing adaptations. Obviously, there's a lot of things out there that have other adaptations as well, other groups of organisms, but we just don't have time and we don't have the specimens to be able to show all these things off. So that's just kind of a background on some of the things that live underground or spend their entire lives underground. So thank you for watching. Please tune in next week. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us in A New Way to Museum with the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell for notifications when we release a new video. Support us on Patreon for early access and exclusive content. You can also follow us on all our social media. Links are found in the description. Thanks for watching, and follow your curiosity to new discoveries.